Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Welcome, everyone, to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. Great to have you joining us here on the show today. We are so excited for our guest, Emily Westerberg Love, and she is a former Arizona State basketball player. In high school, she was the bomb diggity, as they say. 2003 Gatorade Player of the Year and a state champion at Central Valley High School in Oregon. And then she goes to Arizona and leads ASU, Arizona State, to 3 NCAA Tournament appearances, including a Sweet 16 appearance in 2005 and an Elite 8 appearance in 2007. She was the first ASU player to ever earn All-Pac 10 honors 3 times and then graduated from Arizona State in 2007. Interestingly enough, she was selected in the 3rd round of the 2007 WNBA Draft, but passed on a pro career. We talk about that on today's podcast. She's also a member of the Arizona State Sports Hall of Fame, which I briefly touch on at the very end of the podcast. But she is someone who's seen a lot, been through a lot, and has a lot to say. She's a super smart girl, and I was just so thankful. She's not a girl, she's a woman, but I was so thankful to have her on the podcast. She was introduced to me by Kristen Bell, who was on our podcast in late November, and now I get to talk to Emily Westerberg Love, and we talked about apologetics. We talked about having a crisis of faith. We talked about dealing with fear and anxiety. We talked about passing on that pro career in the WNBA, and we talked about foster parenting. So this went a lot of different directions that I wasn't quite sure we'd ever get to on this podcast, but it's a really interesting life that Emily Westerberg Love has lived, and she's got a lot to say, and you need to hear about it. She's got a lot of wisdom. Bring a pen, bring a paper, and take a listen to Emily Westerberg Love, the former Arizona State basketball player, right here on Sports Spectrum. Emily, welcome to Sports Spectrum.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to talk to you, Emily, and I love your story, and it came from a connection, which is really an example of how the body of Christ works. It came from a connection with Chris Bell, who was recently featured on our podcast, a college basketball referee, and I love these connections within the body. Her story is a great one as well, and yours is too. And it's funny, the one thing that you mentioned when we were connected on our text thread was that you have a bit of an affinity for Ravi Zacharias, who was also on this podcast. So let's just start with that and go a little light first. And just Ravi, I was very nervous interviewing Ravi.
I bet, yes.
And he's amazing, and he tells such, or he speaks such truth. Why is that a guy that resonates with you sort of in your walk?
Wow, Jason. So before we moved from where I grew up, I'd been married, and we'd had a few children, and we moved from where we grew up in this tight-knit community to Seattle. And so in Seattle, we actually had an opportunity to listen to Ravi speak at a church. And before that, I was just a huge fan. I thought that his ability to communicate in a loving but truth-filled way was the most just profound thing I'd ever seen, honestly. The way that he was able to, argue, technically, apologetics is the arguing of your faith, but he didn't do it with arguing. And you would listen to his stories, and he would travel around the globe, which was to me like, this is just, I can't even imagine going into places that were really hostile towards the Bible and towards Christianity. And the way that he could speak so profound, so prophetic, but with so much love, it drew me in. And I think there have been times in my walk where I didn't do that well, or I was more on the judgmental side, or I was more on that abrasive side. And so the second that I found out who he was, what he did, and just how eloquently he communicated, I just fell in love with him, honestly. So we got to see him live in Seattle, and then we moved to Atlanta, which is like the Bible Belt, and all these amazing pastors and speakers and authors come, from all over, but a lot in the South. So we got to watch him live again in Atlanta. And then this is just, again, like body of Christ. I met a girlfriend in Atlanta, just fell in love with her and her family. Stephanie Phillips, her brother, actually works for Ravi's ministry. So when she told me that, I was like, wait, time out. Like, this is not even happening. I am going to be just a fan group, like junkie. I'm going to go like hide and sneak out in his office and eat lunch with Lou, is his brother who works there. And so anyways, really right before we moved back home, which is a very fun and just so thankful and blessed for this opportunity as well to be back with family. I had the opportunity to listen to Ravi live at their headquarters, and then got an opportunity to shake his hand and just thank him for, the incredible ways that he's ministering. And I really do believe he's a prophet, in this day and age. And I just, anyways, love him. So short of, I tell my husband, I was super close to trying to kiss him on the cheek. Didn't want to scare him off. So I just stuck with the handshake, but I'm a large fan, and, just so thankful for what he's doing, because I feel like, I think that's a cool part about these figureheads, when you feel like you can attach yourself to them, and then it makes an impact in my little bitty life. It's amazing. So that's kind of my love for him.
No, I think it's great. And I find myself sometimes, I've gotten to meet a lot of, I guess, my heroes, especially heroes in the faith, through this. And to talk to him, I was really nervous in talking to Ravi Zacharias. I'm like, I am not the smart guy here. He is. I really just want to sound like I can somewhat hang with him. It's like
exactly
going court with you, Emily. I just want to show I know how to hit a jumper, and just that I can hang for one or two baskets here. But
yeah, exactly.
It's a weird thing though, because the dynamic of being a fan of someone who's just out there preaching the gospel, and I know God wants us to be the fan of him, not of other people, but yet there's still an affinity to talk to other guys and meet them and see them and just be in awe of how they're able to connect, how they're able to preach, how they're able to reach. But from an apologetic standpoint, you mentioned that, and that's a struggle. I think we all have a struggle with that. How has that been for you in your walk, just being able to defend the faith, especially being a figure who played college basketball and was pretty good at it?
I think, just 2 points. I loved what you said about ultimately, like these figureheads of our faith, we can do a really quick and easy job to idolize them. And I think especially with social media now and our connections to them. So I definitely think that's one thing that we always have to be careful of, that we're not elevating their opinions or, just who they are above Christ himself. But, I think, in my opinion, a great figurehead is someone that points you to Jesus. And I think that's what he did for me. I will never forget, in Seattle, he ignited in me this fire. I was raising little babies at home, I didn't have time to, eat my own food hot, let alone open the word. And I felt like when I heard him speak, it reignited this fire to just fall in love with Christ again. And so it was absolutely Ravi doing his job, right, to help me see Christ more clearly. And so that made a huge impact on my life. But second, I think apologetics, when you're in the spotlight, I think we tend to, there's a pendulum, right? That it's in the world. It's like we swing, we're just human. We do such a bad job of staying in that middle of grace and truth. Jesus did it perfectly, but I find, at least for me, we're like all the way over to truth or all the way over to grace. And so for me, I found that, and people who I've listened to, and Ravi, even just himself, I need to be able to have some answers, right? Like that's my job, to be able to defend myself. When people ask for the hope that we have, it says, be able to speak about your hope. And so I think there's such a big piece of me that's like, listen, this is scientifically proven. These are historical facts. This is not made up. Let me talk to you about what I know and do my job to use my mind to defend my faith. But at the end of the day, Jason, no matter what, it's going to be my experience with Christ that's going to make a lasting impression. So if I'm not living it, if I don't speak authentically about it, and if it's not something that people see in me, then those truths, they're not going to matter. So I've really had a fun, challenging, convicting time in my walk with Christ, to see how the Lord has pulled those things out of me in seasons where I need to be, sharpening the sword in terms of, being in the word and, what are my facts, and also just making sure that I'm living above reproach and that I'm loving well and that I'm serving, so that it's really that 2-in-1, right? We can't just one without the other. It just really isn't as powerful. And so that's what I love about apologetics, and especially Ravi's take on it, is you can see him defend the faith. He knows the word of God better than anyone I've ever seen. And yet he lives with such grace and such dignity and such a light that I'm like, that's what I want. And so that's the inspiration for me to try to live out both of those things in my life.
Emily Westerberg Love is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. Let me go back a little bit. You mentioned being a Christian. You've been a Christian for a while, grew up in a Christian home. Talk about that walk with the Lord and just kind of growing in him, and maybe a moment where that faith that was your parents' faith became your own.
Honestly, I talk about how my parents and I love my husband so much, but I'm like always begging to let him move in with my parents, because I'm like obsessed. I'm like, can't we just live together in a commune? They're just like literally the best people on the planet. So thankful for mom and dad, Nick and Yo, and just the way that they they were the grace and truth. Not only did we live church, we went on Sunday, we did devotionals, we read throughout the week. It was not just like a Sunday thing, but they love us so well, and they love the world so well. They are the most generous people I know. So that was the foundation of my faith. I'm so blessed that is what I got to, kind of start out in life with. So just grew up in the church, had a phenomenal communities. It was a really amazing childhood. And then I was that kid that, my sister, I'm obsessed with my sister as well. She's an older sister, but and we joke about her, but she's like, listen, Emily, you are the way you are because you saw my mistakes and you didn't want to do those in your own life. And she would say she was more adventurous and a risk taker. And I was just always that kid that was like, I remember praying at a really young age, Lord, don't break me before I learn a lesson that I need to learn. Like I didn't ever want to be broken. I wanted to be, obedient. And I wanted to be able to hear what he was saying before it took something massive for him to get my heart. So that was just, I think God really captivated my heart at a young age. And, that happens differently for all of us. So, but it wasn't until, college was a huge step for me. So, outside of this comfort zone truly of my parents and my family, and, go to a massive university. Arizona State was the number one party school in the nation. It usually is in the top 5. Yeah. And you have all of these crazy opportunities at your hand, and you don't have anyone telling you, hey, we're going to church. You have to reestablish a community. You have athletics. It's really hard to find time for anything besides athletics in school when you play Division I sports. And so for me, it was a huge momentum shift of, wow, I'm going to is this all what I believe to be true? And is this going to make, am I going to continue to prioritize this in my life, or am I going to have to battle with the way the world was going to be pulling at me? And I remember, like, I wasn't perfect. I always didn't make great choices. I have had to learn, but I remember a moment this evening when I was at college. It was my freshman summer. And I remember kneeling down. I remember crying. I remember saying, Lord, this experience is yours. So help me to be different, even if that means I'm an outcast. Help me to live for you. Help me to see this platform as something that you want to glorify you. And in all ways, like, let me live a life that would honor and glorify you. And again, it was not easy. It was excruciatingly hard, but that was definitely a pivotal moment for me where my faith became my own.
And I know basketball, huge part growing up. You mentioned to me in our discussions before we started taping, you were in the gym all the time as a kid. So basketball was the other side of the spectrum with faith as well as part of Emily Westerberg's journey growing up, right?
Oh, absolutely. And they say the 10,000 hour rule, right? You have to spend 10,000 hours doing something to, master it. And then I think Tim Ferriss takes another level and says 10,000 hours of like a mastery level to just be phenomenal at it. And so that was absolutely the case for me. I mean, I was in the gym all the time. My dad, I was lucky enough to have him as my coach. We have a really special relationship. My mom and dad never missed a game. My mom was just so supportive. That was truly my life. And so it was interesting because I think sports, you don't have a ton of time to get in trouble. And so that's a blessing. But the lessons I learned through the teamwork, discipline, grit, determination of all of that. I mean, the anxiety and the, pressure to perform. I mean, that's not easy. That was incredibly difficult for me. And but being able to take my lens of faith and put that into sports, that was so, hugely helpful. And, honestly, Jason, my best friends were the girls on my AAU team, on my basketball teams, and particularly Aubrey Johnson. She's Aubrey Chestnut now, but her and we met at 11 through our AAU team. And then we actually ended up telling each other, we promised each other we were going to sign as a package deal our junior year of high school. And it just so happened she's phenomenal. She's more talented than me in every way, but she's about 6'2". I'm about 6'1". And so we said, hey, we were kind of getting recruited by all the same schools anyways. We said, let's just be a package deal. And we're just going to tell all the teams that, like, you either get one of us, you get both of us or none of us. And it was just, oh my goodness, being able to go through the recruiting process with her. And, oh man, one of the highlights of my lives. And then being able to play at Arizona State with her. That was just really, really special. And she's still we moved back. My husband's working with her husband now. And so it just happened. It's still just this friendship that's a sisterhood that I'm really thankful. And she's actually the reason why I know Kristen Bell. So it's just a really cool overlapping of these phenomenal people who truly make me better just by being in their presence.
I know that you and Aubrey too, you were bonding obviously in high school, getting ready to go to college. And then you mentioned to me simply about having a crisis of faith with something that Aubrey went through. It was your senior year, I believe, in college at Arizona State. Can you share that story?
Yeah, that was, that still today is the hardest, darkest period of my life. So we were on a basketball trip, and Aubrey has an older sister and a younger brother, and then her mom and dad. And they just, they really like helped raise me. And so we were actually on a Thanksgiving tournament trip. So it's coming up just about this time of year. And we were in the Virgin Islands. And so we were lucky enough to get to take a tropical trip every year at Arizona State. And we were just about to head into the championship game against Rutgers. And we had spent the morning actually doing a Bible study on the beach. So we had 5 of us. And I remember they came to look for us. And I was like, that was kind of weird. We were like headed up to breakfast, and then they actually took Aubrey off, without us, and this sick feeling in my stomach. And I saw some of our staff crying, and we found out that Jordan Johnson died of an enlarged heart. So you hear about that a lot, athletes that their heart just stops to have a heart attack. And it broke me to my knees. And, I thank God for the gift of being able to sit in this gorgeous location. And I remember sitting out on the beach and I couldn't stop crying. I had never seen, death up close. I hadn't felt that for myself. I was, 20 years old. And I remember thinking, Lord, I know that you're good, but I don't see it. And just walking through this with my best friend and her family, and this became our season. And I just actually was able to talk with my coach recently about it. And she talks about how this was one of the most special teams that she's ever had still, because everything was stripped away. And what mattered most was Jordan, and playing every day like it was our last. And so I definitely had a crisis of faith. I think I had believed for so long that Lord, if I follow you, if I'm obedient, that you're going to make my life easy. That's the promise. And all of these falsehoods that are not true about God, they crumbled at my feet. And I watched a faithful, loving family that raised their children up in the Lord lose their son. And I was forced to choose, God, am I going to choose to believe what you say? Am I going to choose to believe that you're good, even though I don't feel it, that truth over that emotion? And I did. And I saw him so much more clearly. And I had the opportunity to help my best friend grieve through this. And we spent a lot of that year crying. We spent a lot of that year rejoicing. We had the best year that the school has ever had, which is also just such a cool thing. We went to the Elite Eight, 1 game short of the Final Four, and one of the best records. And so I don't think that was an accident either. Just taking that, again, sports, it can be so easy to care about your performance and winning and all that stuff. But when you stepped on the floor every day and you were grateful for the lungs, or for the air in your lungs, then it made us play differently. And then, unfortunately, 5 months later, her mom and dad were on a motorcycle trip, and we lost her dad. They got hit by a drunk driver, and he lost his life in the motorcycle accident. And another crisis of faith. Honestly, Jason, I'm not going to lie and tell you that I haven't dealt with severe anxiety over this. So the trauma of watching this happen 5 months apart, and right before I get married and I have kids, and being a young mom and having just this, months, away from raising little babies. I became, in many situations, locked by fear of, what am I going to do if I lose my babies? What am I going to do if I lose, my husband? Lord, I can't do this. This is too much. And just the last, 7 years, the Lord has taken me through this journey. Truly in the valley of fighting my fear so hard. And I would encourage anybody who's struggled with losing someone, or anxiety or depression, or just that trauma that you experience, it, don't be discouraged in the fight. The fight means that you are trying, that you believe that you're working this out, right? It talks about working out our faith. And so I think, I've heard from well-intentioned people, well, fear means that you just aren't trusting, that you don't have enough faith. And I would just say no. Like, if you are fighting at all, that means that you know that God has things for you, and that you're just human. And so, I've worked so hard with the Lord to get outside of this, where, I catch myself now, thinking irrational thoughts about fear. But I can say that with a community and a counselor, and, lots of tears and crying and a support team, I can say I'm constantly on the other side where it's not as debilitating anymore. And I can talk about Tom and Jord and the amazing men that they were, and just my absolute love and admiration for them, and the ability to dream about what that hug is going to feel like in heaven. And I can do that now, with a smile. Sometimes we still cry, but it's gotten better over the years with time. And I'm so thankful that the Lord was so good to pursue me in that process and to just show me his just overwhelming love. So it was a tough season, Jason, but we made it out on the other side. And I do think that we're better because of it. So it was very impactful for me.
Well, you just mentioned something too that really sticks out for me, Emily, which was, you said community and counseling. And because fear and anxiety has it ever been more present than it is right now as we tape in 2019, just with people, but even with young people. But I see just with the magnification of social media and everybody seeing, in a lot of ways, the mask that exists for all of us when we put our best, if you will, our Sunday best on social media, when we post a picture or post how everything's going great. So talk about the counseling and the community. Those two words, I think, are where I want to go next, because they're both extremely important for all of us, especially as followers of Christ, but trying to work through fear and anxiety and understanding that it's real. It's okay to go through it. It's okay to acknowledge it. Even if you are a Christian, it's not like you're perfect and everything's fine, but how that all helped you, how the counseling helped you, which I think is a taboo topic for a lot of people, but I think it's important. And also, obviously, I think community, which is one where everybody understands that's really important too.
Oh my goodness. Amen. You have totally, I think you just asked one of the most important questions for 2019 and 2020 is how are we going to battle the anxiety and depression that seems to be running rampant? And I could just I cannot say more and enough about finding a community that you can just take all the layers off, take off all the makeup, scrub it off, and show them who you really are. And let me tell you something, you have to be super brave to start and to do that. And a lot of people I talk to now that I'm in coaching as well, it's like people are dying for authentic community. And you think, you can, we've all heard this, you can have 1,000 friends, thousands of friends on Facebook, but who really knows you? So the number one step, I think, is to be brave and to take a step to find it, because other people want it too. It's just people are scared to take that first step. So, what does that look like if you don't have a community? It's looking for, people who share your interests, people who share your hobbies, and being brave to literally start a conversation. Ask someone what their name is. Ask them, you have to find community. And so until you can go deep, right, you have to have someone that you even can call, that you can get together with. And so I would say that it is going to be so uncomfortable to start the process, Jason, if you do not have anyone. And I'm going to tell you to do it anyways, to face your fears. You're worth it. And think about the other side of it as well, that someone is on their couch, lonely in their apartment, in their dorm, in their house, dying for someone to be their person that can see them for all their worth and love them anyway. So that's definitely the first step. Is it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to take your time. You're going to have to prioritize it. It doesn't just happen most of the time as organically as we want it to. It happens by getting out there, putting time in your week and in your weekend to make time for people. So I'd say that is huge. My husband and I, we have always valued a home group. And so we have done that ever since we've been married, whether we've been, moving or kids or whatever. And our home group, they are our people where we meet weekly. We talk about Jesus. We talk about real things. We talk about when our marriage is tough and how do we raise our children and what are the fears that we have and what are the idols that we're struggling with, and people that know you. And then it's so crazy when you have a problem, and, we've been foster parents, and when we got a call that we were bringing in a foster baby, the meals that showed up at our doorstep, the prayers that came in, what do you need? When we've had seasons where I've been, I have been scared. I've been scared so bad that I've cried for a week and I just can't get out of this funk, that my friends show up at my door with a coffee and they say, let me love you. And they listen to my fears and they encourage me through it. This is so profound. Kristen, when I had to take my baby to the ER because he was having an asthma attack, she came over at 8:30 without even a word. And she stayed until after 1 a.m. because she's a person that I could rely on, and she's my community. So again, it takes time, but be brave and know that you're worth it and take a step to find that in your life. And then I would say counseling. I think there's this horrible myth that counseling's for the broken. And there's so much pride wrapped up in admitting that you need a counselor. And I would say no to pride. Do not go there. I would say you take that step and you just say, we are all broken in some form or fashion. I had a phenomenal childhood. But the trauma of life, it has worn me down, and that's going to happen to all of us at some point in time. And if your life has been perfect up to this point, I'm just going to say, you hold your breath. It's coming. We're all human. It's all going to come.
That's right.
So don't succumb to the lie that, you know what, that's going to show my cards to the world that I'm not perfect. I don't have it all together. Let me tell you something. When you admit that you need help in certain areas of your life, watch the doors open to people's vulnerability when they tell you, no way, you go through this too. And you find a community, again, in your honesty, that's going to support you through, wow, you know, I've been struggling with fear. You know what? I've had a miscarriage and I'm having a hard time getting over that. My marriage is horrible and it looks like I love my husband, but I can't stand him right now. You know, whatever it is, that you find that these people, that you can really find this community where you say, we're going to build each other up. We're going to love each other. And I mean, it's not a surprise, right, that God called us to that because he knew we would need each other. So those would be my points, kind of, Jason, to get someone out there and just say, if you're struggling, and even if things are going well, eventually you will. And your people, they are going to be what holds your arm up. Like, you know, the story in Moses, when you need someone to hold your arm up, you're going to have someone there to do that for you.
It's good stuff there. A couple more questions with Emily Westerberg Love here on Sports Spectrum. So interestingly enough, with your basketball career, you were drafted to the WNBA and then passed on a pro career, which I think is fascinating. Why pass on the pro career? You mentioned also that you had a burden and a yearning for foster parenting as well, which I want to get to. I don't know if the two are linked. They may be. But it just came to my mind that you mentioned foster parenting as well. But you passed on the WNBA, selected in the third round. Why was that?
You know, I felt like, well, number one, my body started to break down on me. And, you know, they say, I believe that there's people who peak in college and then there's people who peak, you know, and professionally. I personally think my dad's sweet. And of course, my dad, he's always going to think the best of me. He's like, oh, you would have been great. You could have made it. I was like, Dad, I think I'm done. I think I've peaked. My body was hurt and my knee actually need a knee replacement currently, which is such a bummer at 34, but, my knees, you know, on bone. It was just, my body was truly breaking down. And, you know, honestly, I could just sense God shifting my heart to something different. I had spent years and years and years, and I am still so obsessed with the sport. Like, I love it so much. I love coaching it. I love shooting around and trying to beat my husband in it, in horse. But I felt like God was shifting my heart and I was ready to be done. And, I could not wait to marry the love of my life. I met my husband, Gatorade Love, in college, and he was the center for the Arizona State football team. He actually had an opportunity to play professionally as well. So he was with the Steelers for a short time and then they let him go. And we were planning to be married that summer. And honestly, my eyes were set to love him and be his wife. And so I think a lot of people are like, well, how could you do that? Like, you know, that doesn't make a ton of sense. And I think it's just that I don't even know if it was that eternal perspective or, again, God just calling me to something new, but like I was ready to hang up my shoes and be his wife. And so that was, you know, it all actually happened to, it was kind of this weird sort of series of events, but we were going to actually go on a European trip with our Arizona State basketball team. So Aubrey and I were going to do that. Aubrey was actually a free agent and she got drafted, or if she was a free agent as well. From the same team. So we had to choose if we were going to sign with the WNBA contracts, because then that would have not made us eligible to go on this trip with our college team. And it had been such a huge year that we really were doing that. We're wanting to do that. So we kind of both, for different reasons, you know, we were like, okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to forego that. There were some opportunities to play overseas actually together as well. So we thought we would look at that sort of direction. And then, I mean, in God's timing, he can see the future. We can't. It just so happened that like right around the time that we were going to be heading out for a European trip, Tom, you know, passed away in the motorcycle accident. And then we both moved home and just spent the year really just taking care of each other. And so that all, I think, worked out how it was supposed to. But, you know, ultimately I got married. We got married in July. And I've just had the best time. This guy, Grayling, he is just, you know, my better half in every way. He's just a model of a man of God. And I have had the opportunity to, you know, follow him around the country as he's lived out his dream professionally. And it's just really the joy of my life to be his wife and to raise kids with him. And just the way that he leads our family is just, I cannot speak highly enough of him. And so that's been a really, really fun journey. And who knows now what would that have looked like if I would have played professionally, but I'm really glad I made the choice. So
what about this heart for fostering? Because it's obviously everybody, I think, you know, when they get married, have kids, that's a kind of a normal thing. And I have some, and obviously foster parenting is a wonderful thing. And I have friends at my church who foster, and I'm always amazed at, because not a lot of people do. And it's almost like, the rarity where it almost should be the norm in the church in many ways. Why the burden and the yearning, I guess, to become a foster parent?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it definitely is sort of this like, oh my gosh, if you can do that, that you're a hero. You get raised automatically on a pedestal. And I would say that we got to break that down too, because anybody has what it takes to be a foster parent. But for us, I think it's really cool again, how God has wired Graylin and I to be a good match for each other. But we moved to Atlanta and we had three kids. They were, at the time they were 4, 6 and 7. And it's funny because I'd gone through this period of immense, like right in front of your face parenting. There was just no break. And we went to a sermon series. Andy Stanley's has a church at North Point in Atlanta. It's phenomenal teaching. And he had this series on kind of what breaks your heart, what lights your heart on fire. And, kind of what are you going to do about these yearnings that God put in your heart? And it just so lined up with foster care for us. My husband grew up in a family and in a difficult environment, a dad that in many ways you fell short and it was not healthy, and it was a scary environment. And his mom is a hero of ours, and she raised these kids on her own, and he grew up in inner city Sacramento. So that was another piece to this equation, and a not safe neighborhood. And he had the most phenomenal mentors and coaches. Mike Sanfratello at Arizona State FCA. We both were involved in FCA at ASU, and just these men who changed his life. And so he always has had this kind of desire to give back. Like the dad that I didn't have in some regards, I got through these men who were willing to sacrifice for me. And when you feel that sort of unconditional love, like you didn't know me anything, but you were willing to love me like your own son, it's just, you want to do something with it. And then for me, after hearing this sermon and also just feeling like the Lord has blessed us with so much that I feel selfish. God did not call me to build my own kingdom on earth. He called me to build his. And so if I hoard my pretty little family and my pretty little home and this pretty safe little life, and I haven't done anything with it personally, for me, that was convicting. I was really challenged with the thought of how am I building God's kingdom on earth? And so for us, that was totally foster care. And, honestly, I would say to anybody who is on the verge of any change or is feeling a call, do not let fear get in the way. You have to just start. You have to take that phone call. Do not say, I'll get around to it when I feel more comfortable, when we have more money in the bank, when I know what I'm doing. I'm going to research foster care for a year before I jump in. Don't do that. If God has placed it on your heart, take a step, because it will never be wrong. And that's what we did. We jumped in, had no idea what we were doing, went to a training, and we went to the certification class, and we were like, Lord, this is it. We're going to jump in, and whatever ways this is scary and hard and terrifying, you're going to meet us there. And the number one thing I get is, number one, I could never do that because I can't give a kid back. And number two, a lot of women say, I want to, but my husband isn't really up to it. Those are the two things I hear all the time. And to the point of I can't do it because I would never give a kid back. What made a huge impact for me was that another foster parent said, it's not about our hurting. It's about their healing. So when we can think about it less selfishly, like, oh, I can't do it. What was going to happen to our family? And we think about the gift of love that we'll be giving no matter what happens. That was the turning point for me to say, I can do this. And number two, we had a baby girl. She was a preemie, tiny little nugget, 5 pounds when she came to us. And we thought we were going to have her long-term, potentially adopt. We didn't know. We got a call 5 weeks after we got her, and her aunt came and picked her up within 15 minutes of that phone call. So we had to pack her stuff up. And in 15 minutes, she was out the door, and there was no more newborn cries and feedings. And it was really, really tough for me. I'm not going to lie. It was hard, but I had this moment with God where I remember thinking, Lord, if you made the world and you knit this together, then you can knit my broken heart back together. And knitting it back together differently is going to be exactly what I need. So I'm going to trust that if I have a broken heart, you're big enough, you're good enough to knit it back together, and I will still be whole. So that's kind of what we did. We fostered her, and then her aunt got her, and she's in a phenomenal situation, which is so fun just to really celebrate them and their family. And then we changed agencies, and then we went to Spokane for the summer, and we spent some time playing and having a great time with my family. And the second we touched down in Atlanta, we got a call, which we knew was going to happen because there's such a need for foster parents. They said, hey, we have this baby boy. and he needs a home. He's a newborn. He's been in the hospital detoxing, and we needed him to go somewhere. And I remember I wanted a little girl really bad, and because we have a daughter and then we have 2 sons. And I remember as clear as day, I didn't hear an audible voice, but I remember God saying to my spirit, do the thing that's right in front of you. So I called my husband and I said, I want a girl so bad, but this is our baby. Like, I know we need to say yes. And he was like, okay, say yes, let's do it. So, they told us he was a Caucasian baby as well, which this is just a fun detail in the story of God. Like, I'm Hispanic, my husband's black and white. So our kids have this beautiful skin tone. They said he was, a Caucasian baby. Well, it turns out he's not. He's actually Spanish. He looks just like all of us. People don't know that we we've adopted him. So we had him for a year, and then it looked like we were going to get to keep him. We weren't quite sure. It wasn't until 2 years and 2 months that we finalized the adoption. And this was just a few months ago, and he's our baby boy forever. So when I think about, the ways God has stretched us, grown us, and the gift of my baby boy, and being able to say to him, there's a lot ahead of us that we don't know. And I think that's the other thing I would say is, don't be afraid of the unknown. How am I going to handle this? How am I going to handle that? We don't know what's going to be ahead, but God does. And so it's okay. I think that's where a lot of the anxiety, right, and the depression comes from. It's the past that's bothering us, or it's the future we don't know, we can't control. And I've been there, but I take a deep breath and I just say, Lord, you'll meet me there. When it's time, you'll help me. When it's time to talk to him about, his biological family, then you'll help us, and you'll help his heart, and you'll help his hurts, and you'll be in that process. So don't be scared of what you can't see, because again, a God so big to create the world, he can help us through that process. And being able to tell my son of it one day that, God gave me 3 children that I didn't get to choose, but I fought for you. I cannot wait to tell him that. He's just 2, so he doesn't understand that quite yet, but right. I cannot wait to tell him that. And it's honestly been a bigger blessing to us and our family than I think it'll ever be to him. So
I love that. We could spend a whole hour talking about just taking leaps of faith and fear and what holds us back. We're not going to do that right now, but what we will do is we'll talk about closing this podcast with my favorite question. We ask it to all of our guests. If you heard us asking, even Ravi Zacharias got this question, which I love to ask. What is the Lord teaching you right now, Emily? Because God's brought you to where you are through all of this. What are you learning from God? What's the lesson he's teaching you right now?
That's so good. Oh my goodness. Like, where do I start? It's a lesson every day. I think right now, as I'm starting my own business to be a life coach, I think it's to surrender every single day to him, my dreams, my plans, my vision, and just say, Lord, whatever you want to make this, just help me to obey, and just help me to walk in such a closeness to you that I can feel when you tell me to turn left, when you tell me to turn right. And then ultimately, this is not about my glory ever. When I get consumed with, what's this going to look like, and how big is this going to be, and all these different, what does success look like? It's no, Lord, I just need to focus my eyes on you. So I definitely think that's like one of the biggest things right now as I build up a new business. And then I think it's humility. It's right now I have a job as well to raise my family, and I can get selfish really quick with, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. And, how am I going to get done what needs to be done, and where's my me time? And it's God is continuing to strip me down to say, there's pride, there's selfishness, and Emily, set your eyes on me and do the thing that's right in front of you, just like he called me to do with our baby boy, and to just follow him selflessly, and to watch where pride tends to sink. I think it's easy for an athlete to struggle with pride because the world glorifies you for the ways that you're successful, and they continue to do so again in social media and all these things. And so I think to continue to just see that as a fight and say, Lord, in whatever ways you want this to look, I'm willing to, follow you. And so for me, that's what it is right now. It's how can I be a selfless husband, how can I be a selfless wife and a mom? And how can I continue to reach out to my community and show him and show them his love? That's kind of the lessons that I'm walking through right this minute. So
lots of good stuff there. She is Emily Westerberg Love, member of the Arizona State Sports Hall of Fame. That's a pretty cool accomplishment, Emily. You got to put that on the top of the mantle or the resume. Emily.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Hall of Fame, right? That's pretty cool.
All the kids that know me as Mom, can I have a sandwich? So at this point, It doesn't feel super.
Hall of Fame gets tossed out at that moment.
That's exactly right. When the diapers need to be changed, no one cares about if you're in the Hall of Fame, but I'm thankful for that. And I'm proud of what our team accomplished.
No, that is pretty cool. Awesome achievement there. Emily, this has been great. Thanks so much for being here. I'm so glad Kristen Bell introduced us. And now I'm going to hit you up, and you have to keep paying it forward and tell me who we need to have on that for our next podcast. How's that work for you?
That's amazing. Kristen is an all-star. I couldn't be more thankful to be your friend, and I'm looking forward to an opportunity to pay it forward. So thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share with your guests just the greatness of our God.
Great stuff there from Emily Westerberg Love. She's awesome, isn't she? I mean, I teed her up. I asked the question and she nailed it. I mean, she's just so good and had a lot of wisdom there. And we went into a lot of different topics on anxiety and fear and apologetics and having a crisis of faith and foster parenting. I mean, what a story. I told her after we were done, I said, you need to write a book and you need to go be speaking to a lot of people because you have a voice, you're really good at what you do, and you got a great story. And hopefully Emily will be doing that. Maybe we'll have her back on the podcast when her book comes out, because I have no doubt that she should be writing a book. There's no doubt in my mind. And I think she's got a really good story that a lot of people, a lot of women specifically, but a lot of people need to hear. She is Emily Westerberg Love, and we appreciate her for being here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Before we say goodbye, I want to tell you again about our new podcast. It's been out for a little while now. It released December 16th. It's called the Football Sunday Podcast, and it's a first-person, story-driven, faith-driven podcast. Stories from former and current NFL players. They tell the story. I'm not interviewing anybody on the Football Sunday Podcast. This is just the athlete themselves sharing in about a 5-minute span about how God has worked profoundly in their life. It's a really great podcast, and it's really quick. It's 5 to 10 minutes long. You can invest in it and not have it really get, in the way of your day. It could even kind of be a replacement for a daily devotional in some ways, just a great way to start your day maybe. But subscribe today. It's called Football Sunday Podcast, and it is available everywhere podcasts are found. Would love to have you check out the Football Sunday Podcast. It's from the producers of Sports Spectrum. It's our second venture into the podcasting world, and we would love to hear what you think about it. So check it out, Football Sunday Podcast. I think you'll love it. It's available everywhere podcasts are found. We would love to have you check us out on social media as well. Our Sports Spectrum pages, sports_spectrum is our handle on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. You can find us everywhere. Our DMs are open. You can like, you can share, you can reply, you can retweet, all of those buzzwords. Get our content, help us get our content out there, and you can also reach us directly with any guest ideas or suggestions that you might have, including someone like Emily Westerberg Love, who is the bomb diggity, as I said at the beginning of this podcast. Thanks so much for listening. We love you guys. We'll see you next time, and Happy New Year. Happy 2020. This is the Sports Spectrum Podcast. Have a great rest of your day.